when Martha May's prize-winning chili recipe won the annual Fort Brenton cook-off. Nobody suspected it would expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of the U.S. military. But one unusual ingredient, sourced from her late husband's tour in Afghanistan, held a secret that would shock the nation. When Dr. Archibald Frost's $50 million experimental rocket exploded during a crucial test at his California aerospace facility, destroying his company's reputation and threatening a multi-billion-dollar NASA contract, the billionaire's CEO publicly declared the engine failure impossible to solve by anyone on Earth. After 30 of the world's top rocket engineers spent 3 weeks unable to diagnose the catastrophic malfunction, 11-year-old Rose Campbell, who spent her afternoons in her grandfather's dusty garage repairing vintage engines with nothing but curiosity and a socket wrench set, noticed something that would make the most powerful man in aerospace eat his words. Her simple observation about fuel systems would not only save American space exploration, but prove that brilliance doesn't require a PhD, just the courage to see what others missed. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The desert wind carried the acrid smell of burned rocket fuel across the Mojave where twisted metal fragments still littered the test range 3 weeks after Dr. Archibald Frost's latest prototype had transformed $50 million worth of cutting-edge technology into expensive scrap. Security fences surrounded the blast site, their chain links rattling in the afternoon heat as investigators continued their futile search for answers that seemed to exist nowhere in their advanced degrees or corporate consulting contracts. Frost Aerospace's corporate tower gleamed like a monument to ambition against the California sky, its reflective glass surfaces hiding the panic that had consumed every executive suite since the explosion. Inside the building's climate-controlled luxury, Dr. Archibald Frost stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, watching cleanup crews remove debris that represented not just mechanical failure, but the potential collapse of everything he'd built through 4 decades of ruthless business expansion. "Sir, the NASA Review Board is requesting another status update," announced his assistant through the intercom, her voice carrying the careful neutrality that staff had learned to adopt when delivering bad news to a man whose temper could end careers with a single phone call. "Tell them what I've told everyone else," Frost replied without turning from the window, his reflection showing the kind of controlled fury that had made him both feared and successful throughout the aerospace industry. "The problem is impossible to solve. We're dealing with phenomena that exceed current engineering understanding." The words tasted bitter, representing the first time in his professional life that Archibald Frost had been forced to admit defeat. His empire had been built on the premise that enough money could solve any technical challenge, that superior resources and exclusive talent could overcome any obstacle. The smoking crater in the desert suggested otherwise. 30 mi away in the modest community of Horizon Valley, Rose Campbell crouched beside her grandfather's workbench, completely absorbed in the delicate process of rebuilding a carburetor from a 1957 Chevrolet. Her small hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting tiny screws and cleaning fuel passages with the patient attention that 11-year-olds usually reserve for video games or social media. "Rose, dinner's ready," called Captain Helen Campbell from the kitchen of their single-story ranch house, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone accustomed to managing both military personnel and stubborn children. "Just 5 more minutes, Mom," Rose replied without looking up from her work, using a dental pick to clear a clogged jet that had been causing the engine to run rough. "I think I found why Mr. Peterson's truck keeps stalling. The fuel mixture's too rich because this passage is partially blocked." Clarence Campbell emerged from the garage's back room, wiping his weathered hands on a shop rag that had seen better decades. At 72, Rose's grandfather moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had spent too many years crawling through engine compartments. But his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him NASA's go-to troubleshooter during the glory days of the space program. "What do you think, Grandpa?" Rose asked, holding up the carburetor component for inspection. "The fuel's supposed to flow through here in a fine mist. But if there's crud blocking the passage, it comes out in droplets instead. That changes the burn rate and makes the engine stumble." Clarence examined his granddaughter's work with genuine admiration. Rose's mechanical intuition consistently impressed him, demonstrating understanding that seemed to emerge naturally rather than through formal education. Her explanations revealed thinking that connected abstract principles with practical applications in ways that reminded him of his own early years working with experimental aircraft engines. "That's exactly right, sweetheart," Clarence confirmed, noting the thoroughness of Rose's diagnostic approach. "You're learning to see the whole system instead of just individual parts. That's the difference between good mechanics and great engineers." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Derek Coleman's motorcycle pulling into the driveway, its engine note suggesting the kind of mechanical sympathy that only came from understanding how machines actually worked. At 16, Derek possessed the earnest enthusiasm that characterized teenagers who discovered genuine passion for something beyond pure approval or social media validation. "Hey, Rose," Derek called as he removed his helmet, his sandy hair showing the kind of disorder that came from prioritizing mechanical projects over personal grooming. "Did you see the news about that rocket explosion? They're saying it's some kind of impossible engineering failure that nobody can figure out." Rose looked up from her carburetor work with the curiosity that characterized her approach to all mechanical mysteries. The idea of an unsolvable problem struck her as fundamentally wrong, suggesting either inadequate investigation or misunderstood principles rather than genuine impossibility. "What kind of rocket?" Rose asked, setting down her tools with the careful attention that showed respect for both equipment and ongoing projects. "Some billionaire's private space company," Derek explained, pulling out his phone to show news footage of the twisted wreckage. "Dr. Frost, the guy who owns half the aerospace industry, he's offering $1 million reward to anyone who can explain what went wrong. But 30 top engineers have already tried and failed." Clarence felt his pulse quicken at the mention of rocket engine failure. His 40 years at NASA had taught him that most impossible problems were actually basic issues disguised by complex systems and institutional assumptions. The combination of corporate pressure and consulting fees often prevented investigators from pursuing simple explanations that might challenge expensive expertise. "Derek, show me that footage again," Clarence requested, his engineering curiosity overcoming retirement-induced distance from active problem-solving. "Sometimes the most complex failures have the simplest causes if you know what to look for." Rose moved closer to examine the phone screen, her mechanical instincts engaging with visual evidence that most people would dismiss as random destruction. The pattern of debris distribution caught her attention, suggesting specific failure modes rather than general catastrophic breakdown. "Grandpa, look at how the metal twisted," Rose observed, pointing to wreckage fragments that showed directional stress patterns. "It didn't just explode randomly. Something made it fail in a specific way. Like when a bolt shears because it's carrying load it wasn't designed for." The observation struck both Clarence and Derek as surprisingly sophisticated for someone Rose's age, demonstrating mechanical analysis that connected visual evidence with theoretical understanding of failure modes and stress distribution patterns. "You might be onto something, Rose," Clarence said with the careful attention he'd learned to give his granddaughter's insights. "Directional failure patterns usually indicate systematic problems rather than random accidents. What else do you notice about the debris field?" Rose studied the footage with the systematic approach she brought to all diagnostic challenges, looking for details that might reveal information about the failure sequence and underlying causes. "The biggest pieces are all from the same area," Rose noted, tracing patterns on the phone screen with her finger, like whatever went wrong started in one place and spread from there. If it was a design problem, everything would fail at once. But if it was something like fuel mixing wrong, you'd get exactly this kind of progressive destruction. Derek stared at his 11-year-old friend with growing amazement at analysis that seemed to exceed the insights of professional engineers who'd been studying the same evidence for weeks. Rose's combination of practical experience and intuitive understanding was producing theories that challenged official explanations about unsolvable technical mysteries. "Rose, you really think you know what happened to a $50 million rocket?" Derek asked with adolescent directness that sought honest assessment rather than polite encouragement. "I think I know what didn't happen," Rose replied with scientific precision that distinguished between confident knowledge and speculative theory. "And sometimes knowing what didn't happen is the first step toward figuring out what did." Captain Helen Campbell appeared in the garage doorway, her military bearing softened by maternal concern about her daughter's tendency to become absorbed in mechanical problems that could consume entire evenings if left unchecked. "Rose, I hate to interrupt your engineering consultation, but dinner's getting cold," Helen said with gentle authority that acknowledged the importance of Rose's interests while maintaining household routines. "Coming, Mom," Rose replied, carefully cleaning her tools before storing them in their designated locations with the systematic organization that Clarence had taught her was essential for serious mechanical work. As the Campbell family gathered around their dinner table 30 m away in his corporate tower, Dr. Archibald Frost was concluding another frustrating meeting with consultants whose expensive analysis had provided no useful insights into the failure that threatened to destroy his business empire. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm prepared to double the reward to $2 million for anyone who can provide a viable explanation for this catastrophic failure," Frost announced to the assembled experts, his voice carrying the desperation that unlimited resources couldn't disguise. "My company's survival depends on understanding what went wrong and preventing future occurrences." The room full of distinguished engineers and aerospace consultants exchanged uncomfortable glances, understanding that their collective failure to solve the mystery was becoming a professional embarrassment that could affect their own consulting careers and industry reputations. Dr. Martha Boyd, Frost Aerospace's lead rocket engineer, shifted nervously in her chair as she prepared to deliver another report of investigative failure to a man whose patience was rapidly approaching dangerous limits. Sir, we've examined every system component, analyzed all telemetry data, and consulted with specialists from every major aerospace contractor, Martha reported with professional precision that couldn't quite mask her growing frustration with problems that seemed to defy systematic analysis. All evidence suggests normal operation until the moment of catastrophic failure with no identifiable cause or failure progression. The explanation struck Frost as professionally unacceptable, representing exactly the kind of intellectual surrender that he'd spent decades refusing to accept from subordinates and contractors. His business philosophy was built on the premise that persistent application of superior resources could overcome any technical challenge. Dr. Boyd, no identifiable cause is not an acceptable engineering conclusion, Frost replied with corporate authority that made careers and destroyed reputations with equal efficiency. Our contract with NASA specifically requires reliable propulsion systems. Failure to deliver working technology means failure to maintain our position as America's premier private space contractor. The weight of institutional expectations settled over the assembled experts like gravity, creating pressure that transformed technical investigation into existential crisis for everyone whose professional survival depended on solving problems that seemed designed to resist conventional analysis and established expertise. Back in Horizon Valley, Rose Campbell was discovering that her simple questions about rocket failures were about to intersect with forces that would test everything she understood about fairness, truth, and the relationship between knowledge and authority in ways that would change not just her own life, but the future of American space exploration itself. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Principal Edith Barnes surveyed the controlled chaos of Horizon Valley Elementary's science fair with the satisfaction of someone whose career had been built on nurturing young minds that often surprised adults with their innovative thinking. 23 student projects filled the gymnasium, ranging from conventional volcano demonstrations to more ambitious investigations that pushed the boundaries of elementary-level scientific inquiry. Edith Rose Campbell's display occupied a corner table where she constructed a working demonstration of fuel injection principles using clear plastic tubing, colored water, and a small electric pump salvaged from an aquarium filter. Her project explanation focused on how different injection patterns affected combustion efficiency, complete with charts showing pressure readings and burn rate calculations that would have impressed high school chemistry teachers. Rose, this is remarkable work, Principal Barnes commented as she examined the detailed measurements and logical conclusions that characterized Rose's approach to scientific investigation. Have you considered entering this in the regional science competition? I just wanted to understand why some engines run smooth and others don't. Rose replied with the modest directness that adults often found refreshing after encountering students who'd been coached to provide impressive-sounding answers rather than genuine insights. Derek Coleman approached Rose's display with fresh information that had been dominating online forums where amateur rocket enthusiasts discussed technical failures and speculated about causes that professional investigators might have overlooked. Rose, you've got to see this, Derek said, pulling out his phone to show a technical forum where aerospace engineers were debating Dr. Frost's rocket failure. They're posting detailed analysis of the explosion, and some of these guys think the official investigation is missing something obvious. Rose read through the forum discussions with growing interest in perspectives that challenged established explanations about unsolvable technical mysteries. The online conversations revealed frustration among working engineers who suspected the corporate consulting culture might be preventing practical solutions from reaching decision makers. These engineers think the problem is fuel-related, Rose observed, noting recurring themes in the technical discussions. But they're arguing about whether it's contamination, mixture ratios, or injection timing. Nobody's looking at the whole system working together. Principal Barnes listened to this exchange with educational fascination at how quickly Rose absorbed complex technical information and synthesized it into broader understanding that connected multiple variables rather than focusing on isolated components. Rose, what do you mean about the whole system working together? Principal Barnes asked with genuine curiosity about insights that seemed to transcend normal elementary school scientific understanding. Well, in my carburetor project, I learned that fuel systems have to balance pressure, temperature, and timing, Rose explained using her science fair demonstration to illustrate principles that applied to much more sophisticated machinery. If any one part is wrong, it affects everything else, even if each component tests perfect by itself. The explanation struck Derek as potentially significant for understanding rocket failures that had puzzled professional investigators. Rose's systematic approach to fuel system analysis might reveal relationships that specialized experts had missed through their focus on individual subsystems rather than integrated performance. Across town at the Desert Springs Diner, Iris Powell was coordinating the kind of informal information network that small communities developed around major events affecting local economic stability and social dynamics. Her establishment served as neutral ground where military families, defense contractors, and longtime residents gathered to share perspectives that official channels couldn't provide. Helen Campbell stopped by this morning, Iris reported to her regular customers, who understood that Captain Campbell's position at Edwards Air Force Base provided insights into situations that could affect everyone's economic security. Says they're getting pressure from Washington about the Frost situation. Apparently, some congressmen are concerned about American space capability falling behind foreign competitors. Retired Air Force Master Sergeant Bill Rodriguez stirred his coffee with the careful attention of someone whose military experience had taught him to recognize the difference between routine problems and genuine crisis situations that could affect national security and community prosperity. Iris, when corporate contractors start failing this publicly, it affects more than just their stock prices. Bill observed with veteran understanding of how defense industry problems rippled through local economies and political relationships. If Frost Aerospace loses their NASA contracts, half the skilled jobs in this valley could disappear. The economic implications struck several customers as justification for community interest in technical problems that normally would remain within specialized professional circles. Local prosperity depended on maintaining America's technological leadership in aerospace, making everyone stakeholders in solving problems that threatened that competitive advantage. Meanwhile, at Edwards Air Force Base, Colonel Russell Gibson was reviewing classified intelligence reports that painted a concerning picture of international competition in space technology development. Foreign governments were investing heavily in programs designed to challenge American aerospace superiority, making domestic failures potentially strategic vulnerabilities. Colonel, the Pentagon is requesting detailed assessments of how the Frost situation affects our long-term space capabilities, reported Lieutenant Grant Fisher, whose engineering background provided perspective on technical failures that could have broader implications than immediate corporate embarrassment. Lieutenant, what's your professional assessment of the investigation so far? Colonel Gibson asked with command interest in technical opinions that might illuminate aspects of the crisis that administrative reports couldn't capture. Grant consulted his notes with military precision, understanding that his analysis would influence decisions about resource allocation and strategic planning that extended far beyond single contractor failures. Sir, from an engineering standpoint, 30 experts failing to identify a failure mode suggests either unprecedented technical problems or investigative approaches that aren't matching the actual underlying issues. Grant replied with professional honesty about situations that challenged conventional problem-solving methodologies. The assessment aligned with Colonel Gibson's own concerns about institutional approaches that sometimes prevented innovative thinking from reaching problems that demanded fresh perspectives rather than established expertise. At Frost Aerospace's corporate headquarters, Dr. Archibald Frost was discovering that his company's failure was becoming a public relations disaster that threatened relationships with investors, government partners, and industry competitors who were beginning to question his technical leadership and corporate competence. Sir, 3 major aerospace contractors have withdrawn from joint venture discussions pending resolution of our technical difficulties, announced his chief financial officer with the careful diplomacy that characterized corporate communications about potentially catastrophic business developments. Frost stared at financial projections that showed his empire disintegrating if solutions couldn't be found quickly enough to restore confidence in his company's ability to deliver reliable technology. The mathematics of corporate survival were becoming as unforgiving as the physics that had destroyed his rocket. What about the engineering consulting contracts? Frost asked, though he suspected the answer would provide no comfort about his company's deteriorating position in highly competitive aerospace markets. The consulting firms are requesting contract modifications that limit their liability for failure to solve what they're calling anomalous technical challenges. His CFO replied with the kind of corporate euphemism that disguised serious problems behind acceptable language. The response confirmed Frost's growing suspicion that expensive expertise was proving inadequate for problems that threatened to destroy everything he'd built through decades of aggressive business expansion and technological investment. That evening, Rose Campbell sat at her family's kitchen table working through math homework, while her mind continued processing the technical discussions she'd encountered at the science fair and in Derrick's online forum research. Her mathematical calculations kept drifting toward fuel injection ratios and combustion chamber pressures that seemed relevant to rocket engine performance. Rose, you've been awfully quiet during dinner, observed Captain Helen Campbell with maternal attention to her daughter's mood and behavior patterns. Everything okay at school? I keep thinking about that rocket explosion. Rose admitted with the honesty that characterized her communication with family members who understood her mechanical obsessions. The more I learn about it, the more it seems like the kind of problem that should have obvious solutions if someone looks at it the right way. Clarence Campbell joined the conversation with grandfather's wisdom about technical problems that often appeared impossible until the right perspective revealed their fundamental simplicity. Rose, some of the hardest problems I encountered at NASA turned out to have solutions that seemed obvious once we understood what was really happening. Clarence reflected with the experience of someone who'd spent 40 years making complex systems work reliably under demanding conditions. What made them seem impossible at first? Rose asked with scientific curiosity about how professional expertise could miss solutions that became clear through different approaches. Usually institutional thinking, Clarence replied with honest assessment of how bureaucratic structures could prevent innovative solutions from reaching problems that demanded creative approaches. When everyone focuses on sophisticated explanations, sometimes the simple answers get overlooked. The conversation was interrupted by Derek Coleman's arrival with his motorcycle and fresh information from online technical forums, where amateur investigators were developing theories that challenged official explanations about unsolvable aerospace mysteries. "Mr. Campbell, you've got to see what these engineers are posting," Derek announced as he entered the kitchen with adolescent enthusiasm for discoveries that might prove significant. "They think Dr. Frost investigators are looking in all the wrong places." Clarence examined Derek's phone with professional interest in technical discussions that might illuminate problems through perspectives that corporate consulting couldn't provide. "These forum discussions are more sophisticated than I expected," Clarence observed with appreciation for detailed analysis that demonstrated genuine engineering competence rather than amateur speculation. "The interesting thing is how many of these engineers think the problem is basic rather than advanced," Derek reported with summary understanding of complex technical debates. "They keep saying that simple fuel system issues can create catastrophic failures that look like impossible technical mysteries." Rose listened to this information with growing conviction that her science fair project about fuel injection principles might be relevant to much more significant technical challenges than elementary school demonstrations typically addressed. "Derek, do any of these engineers explain why simple problems would fool professional investigators?" Rose asked with logical curiosity about apparent contradictions between expert analysis and practical solutions. "They say corporate consulting creates pressure to find complex explanations because simple solutions don't justify expensive fees." Derek replied with teenage directness about adult motivations that might prevent practical problem solving. The explanation struck both Rose and Clarence as potentially significant for understanding how institutional factors could interfere with technical investigation when economic interests conflicted with scientific accuracy. As evening settled over Horizon Valley, conversations in homes, diners, and online forums continued to circle around the growing mystery of Dr. Frost's impossible rocket failure. Professional expertise was being challenged by amateur insight. Corporate authority was being questioned by community concern, and an 11-year-old girl's understanding of fuel systems was about to intersect with forces that would test everything she believed about fairness, truth, and the relationship between knowledge and power in ways that would change American aerospace forever. Dr. Velma Hudson maneuvered her rental car through the security checkpoint at Edwards Air Force Base with the practiced efficiency of someone whose consulting career had required navigating military protocols across 3 decades of aerospace troubleshooting. Her reputation for solving impossible technical problems had been built on a foundation of systematic analysis and willingness to challenge established assumptions when conventional approaches failed to produce results. Colonel Russell Gibson met Dr. Hudson in the base's secure briefing room where classified documents and technical specifications covered every available surface. The atmosphere reflected the kind of controlled urgency that characterized military operations when national security interests intersected with corporate failures and political pressures. "Dr. Hudson, thank you for coming on such short notice," Colonel Gibson said with military courtesy that masked deeper concerns about America's technological competitiveness and strategic vulnerability. "We need an independent assessment of the Frost situation that goes beyond corporate consulting limitations." "Colonel, I reviewed the preliminary reports," Dr. Hudson replied with professional directness that characterized her approach to technical challenges. 30 experts failing to identify a failure mode suggests either unprecedented physics or systematic blindness to obvious explanations. The assessment aligned with Colonel Gibson's own suspicions about institutional factors that might be preventing practical solutions from reaching problems that demanded innovative thinking rather than expensive expertise. Lieutenant Grant Fisher spread technical drawings across the briefing table with military precision, organizing information that provided comprehensive overview of the investigation's scope and limitations. "Dr. Hudson, here's what we know," Lieutenant Fisher reported with engineering competence that reflected both technical training and genuine commitment to solving problems that affected national capabilities. Normal telemetry until catastrophic failure, no identifiable stress patterns, all components testing within specifications. Dr. Hudson studied the data with analytical attention that had been sharpened by decades of discovering that impossible problems usually revealed fundamental simplicity once the right diagnostic framework was applied to complex systems. Lieutenant, what about fuel system integration? Dr. Hudson asked with systematic curiosity about aspects of rocket performance that might be overlooked through focus on individual components rather than system interactions. Fuel delivery, pressure regulation, and injection timing all showed normal parameters throughout the test sequence. Lieutenant Fisher replied with technical precision that reflected thorough investigation of conventional failure modes. The response suggested to Dr. Hudson that investigators might be examining subsystems in isolation rather than understanding how multiple variables could interact to create failure modes that appeared impossible when analyzed through traditional diagnostic approaches. Meanwhile, at Horizon Valley Elementary School, Rose Campbell was experiencing the kind of academic frustration that characterized gifted students whose intellectual curiosity exceeded conventional educational frameworks. Her morning classes had covered material she'd mastered months earlier, leaving her mind free to wander toward mechanical problems that seemed more engaging than standardized curriculum requirements. "Rose, can you tell us about the water cycle?" asked Mrs. Patricia Wells, her fourth-grade teacher, with the patient enthusiasm that educators brought to lessons designed for average students rather than exceptional learners. Evaporation, condensation, precipitation, Rose recited with automatic precision while her thoughts remained focused on fuel injection patterns and combustion chamber dynamics that seemed more relevant to understanding how the world actually worked. During recess, Rose found herself drawn to the school's maintenance shed, where custodial equipment and repair supplies offered more intellectual stimulation than playground activities that held little appeal for someone whose interests centered on mechanical systems rather than social games. "Miss Campbell, you probably shouldn't be in here," observed Mr. Frank Peterson, the school custodian, though his tone suggested genuine curiosity about what had attracted an 11-year-old to his workshop rather than the swings and slides that occupied other students. "I was just looking at your lawnmower engine," Rose explained with honest interest in mechanical systems that revealed design principles through practical application. "The carburetor adjustment seems really precise for maintaining consistent RPM under varying load conditions." Mr. Peterson stared at Rose with growing amazement at technical vocabulary that exceeded normal elementary school knowledge and demonstrated understanding that connected theoretical principles with real-world machinery. "Rose, how do you know about carburetor adjustments?" Mr. Peterson asked with genuine curiosity about educational background that could produce such sophisticated mechanical understanding. "My grandpa taught me about fuel systems," Rose replied with characteristic modesty about knowledge that adults often found surprising. "He says understanding how engines breathe is the key to making them run right." The conversation was interrupted by Derek Coleman's arrival at the school fence, where his motorcycle attracted attention from students who appreciated mechanical sophistication even when they couldn't understand its technical principles. "Rose, you've got to see the latest forum posts," Derek called with adolescent excitement about discoveries that might prove significant for understanding corporate aerospace failures. "Some retired NASA engineers are joining the discussion, and they're saying things that contradict the official investigation." Rose hurried toward the fence with interests that prioritized technical discovery over remaining recess time. Understanding that Derek's information might illuminate aspects of the rocket failure that professional investigators were missing. "What are they saying?" Rose asked with scientific curiosity that had been stimulated by days of thinking about impossible problems that seemed to demand simple solutions. "They think Frost's team is overcomplicating the analysis because they're afraid to suggest that a $50 million rocket failed for basic reasons." Derek explained with summary understanding of complex professional dynamics that influence technical investigation. The explanation resonated with Rose's growing suspicion that sophisticated expertise might sometimes prevent recognition of fundamental principles that could be obscured by institutional pressure to find complex explanations for simple problems. At the Desert Springs Diner, investigative journalist Celeste Ward was conducting informal interviews with community members whose perspectives on the Frost situation provided insights that official statements couldn't capture. Her experience covering aerospace industry developments had taught her to recognize when corporate communications obscured rather than illuminated significant technical and political developments. "The whole thing seems designed to make a simple problem look impossible," observed mechanic Tom Bradley, whose 30 years of engine repair had provided practical understanding of how fuel system failures could create dramatic symptoms. "I've seen carburetor problems that stumped dealership technicians because they were looking for computer malfunctions instead of basic mechanical issues." Celeste noted this perspective with journalistic interest in how working-class expertise might challenge professional aerospace consulting that seemed unable to solve problems that threatened American technological leadership and community economic stability. Tom, do you really think professional rocket engineers could miss something that a local mechanic would recognize? Celeste asked with reporter directness that sought honest assessment rather than diplomatic speculation. I think pressure to justify expensive consulting fees can make people overlook obvious solutions. Tom replied with working-class skepticism about institutional motivations that might prevent practical problem-solving when simple answers threaten profitable complexity. The assessment aligned with Celeste's own observations about corporate culture that sometimes prioritized maintaining consulting relationships over achieving technical solutions that might embarrass expensive expertise. Dr. Archibald Frost's afternoon board meeting had devolved into the kind of corporate crisis management that threatened to destroy decades of careful business development and industry relationship cultivation. Stock prices were falling, government contracts were being reviewed, and competitor companies were positioning themselves to absorb Frost Aerospace's market share. Archibald, our insurance carriers are threatening to cancel coverage pending resolution of the technical investigation, announced board member Harrison Blake with corporate directness about financial pressures that could force immediate business decisions regardless of technical considerations. Our legal department is advising settlement discussions with NASA rather than continued investigation that might reveal liability issues, added corporate counsel Margaret Stevens with attorney caution about potential consequences of discovering explanations for failures that could affect multiple lawsuits and insurance claims. Otis Frost listened to this counsel with growing understanding that his corporate empire was being destroyed not just by technical failure, but by institutional systems that prioritized legal protection over scientific discovery and problem resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, settling with NASA admits guilt for failures we don't understand. Frost replied with executive authority that masked desperate concern about losing everything he built through 4 decades of aerospace industry dominance. I want solutions, not legal strategies. The response reflected Frost's growing isolation from advisors whose institutional thinking prevented recognition that his company's survival might depend on approaches that challenged conventional wisdom about expertise, authority, and the sources of innovative solutions. That evening, Rose Campbell sat in her grandfather's workshop, applying lessons from her science fair fuel injection project to theoretical analysis of rocket engine failures that seemed to demand systematic understanding rather than specialized expertise. Grandpa, what would happen if a rocket engine's fuel injectors were fighting against the cooling system? Rose asked with scientific curiosity about system interactions that might create failure modes invisible to conventional analysis. Clarence Campbell looked up from his vintage aircraft engine restoration with immediate recognition that his granddaughter's question addressed exactly the kind of integrated systems thinking that professional investigators might overlook through their focus on individual components. Rose, that's a sophisticated question, Clarence replied with genuine appreciation for insight that connected multiple engineering disciplines. If the fuel injection pattern interfered with cooling flow, you could get hotspots that would cause exactly the kind of catastrophic failure that looks impossible to diagnose. The explanation provided Rose with theoretical framework for understanding how simple design conflicts could create complex failure modes that appeared mysterious when analyzed through conventional diagnostic approaches that examine subsystems in isolation. But wouldn't professional engineers think of that? Rose asked with logical curiosity about apparent gaps between obvious solutions and expert analysis. Professional engineers might be too specialized to see connections between systems that different departments design separately. Clarence replied with honest assessment of how institutional organization could prevent integrated thinking about complex technical problems. The conversation was developing into exactly the kind of educational dialogue that connected practical mechanical understanding with broader lessons about problem solving, institutional thinking, and the relationship between knowledge and authority that would soon test everything Rose believed about fairness and truth in ways that would change American aerospace forever. Mayor Norma Sullivan convened an emergency town meeting at the Horizon Valley Community Center with the kind of political urgency that characterized local government responses to crisis affecting community economic stability and social cohesion. The evening gathering drew an unusually diverse crowd of military families, defense contractors, retired engineers, and longtime residents whose livelihoods depended on maintaining the region's aerospace industry prominence. Folks, we're here tonight because the Frost situation is bigger than just one company's problems. Mayor Sullivan announced to the packed auditorium with political directness that acknowledged community stakes and technical failures that could affect everyone's economic security. If American space capability loses credibility, this entire valley loses jobs and federal investment. The audience responded with murmurs of concern that reflected shared understanding of how defense industry reputation affected local prosperity through contracts. employment, and political support for military installations that provided regional economic foundation. Retired NASA engineer Dr. Arnold Spencer stood up from his seat in the front row with the measured authority of someone whose 4 decades of space program experience provided perspective on technical challenges that transcended corporate politics and consulting limitations. Madam Mayor, I've been following this investigation with professional interest, Dr. Spencer announced with academic authority that commanded immediate attention from community members who understood that NASA credentials carried special significance for aerospace problems. The failure pattern suggests basic engineering issues rather than the impossible technical mysteries that corporate consultants are claiming. The assessment struck several audience members as potentially significant for understanding how institutional factors might be preventing practical solutions from reaching problems that demanded innovative thinking rather than expensive expertise. Captain Helen Campbell rose from her seat with military bearing that reflected both professional competence and personal concern about her daughter's growing involvement in technical discussions that could lead toward confrontation with powerful corporate interests. Dr. Spencer, what kind of basic engineering issues could fool 30 professional investigators? Helen asked with logical curiosity about apparent contradictions between expert analysis and simple explanations. Systems integration problems, Dr. Spencer replied with engineering precision that connected theoretical knowledge with practical experience. When different design teams work on separate components without adequate communication, you can get conflicts that create catastrophic failures while each individual system tests perfectly. The explanation provided community members with framework for understanding how complex organizational structures could prevent recognition of simple technical problems that required integrated thinking rather than specialized analysis. Rose Campbell sat between her mother and grandfather, listening to adult conversations that validated her own growing suspicions about rocket engine failures that seemed to demand systematic understanding rather than sophisticated expertise. Her mechanical intuition was being confirmed by professional perspectives that challenged official explanations about unsolvable technical mysteries. Dr. Spencer, could fuel injection patterns interfere with cooling system efficiency? Rose asked with scientific curiosity that cut through adult diplomatic discussions toward specific technical questions that might illuminate actual failure modes. The question struck Dr. Spencer as remarkably sophisticated for someone Rose's age, demonstrating understanding of rocket engine design principles that connected multiple engineering disciplines through practical mechanical insight. Young lady, that's exactly the kind of systems thinking that modern aerospace consulting often overlooks, Dr. Spencer replied with genuine admiration for Rose's analytical approach to complex technical problems. Fuel spray patterns absolutely can interfere with cooling flow if the injection angles aren't coordinated with thermal management requirements. Derek Coleman leaned forward with adolescent excitement about his friend's recognition by genuine aerospace authority, understanding that Dr. Spencer's validation represented professional confirmation of Rose's mechanical insights. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Congressman Horace Turner was reviewing classified briefings that painted a concerning picture of American space technology vulnerabilities and international competitive pressures that made domestic aerospace failures potentially strategic disasters rather than simple corporate embarrassments. Congressman, the Chinese space program is accelerating development of capabilities that could challenge American technological superiority, warned Pentagon liaison Dr. Robert Matthews with military concern about foreign competition that threaten national security interests. Domestic contractor failures like the Frost situation provide opportunities for adversaries to gain competitive advantages. Turner studied intelligence reports that connected corporate technical problems with broader questions about American aerospace industry competence and federal investment strategies that had assumed private contractor reliability. Dr. Matthews, what are our options if Frost Aerospace cannot resolve their technical difficulties? Turner asked with political calculation about government responses to private sector failures that affected national capabilities. We could nationalize the investigation or redirect contracts to competitors, but either approach would signal weakness in American aerospace industry capability. Dr. Matthews replied with strategic assessment of options that balanced immediate problem solving against long-term political messaging and international credibility. The briefing confirmed Turner's growing concern that the Frost situation represented more than corporate crisis, potentially affecting American technological leadership and political influence in international aerospace markets that determine strategic relationships and economic advantages. Back at Frost Aerospace headquarters, Dr. Martha Boyd was leading another frustrating technical review meeting with consultants whose expensive analysis continued to provide no useful insights into failures that threatened to destroy the company's market position and government contracts. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now spent over $3 million on consultant fees with no progress toward understanding this failure mode, Dr. Boyd announced with professional frustration that reflected both personal career concerns and genuine commitment to solving technical problems that should yield to systematic investigation. Martha, our computer modeling shows all systems functioning within normal parameters throughout the test sequence, reported senior consultant Dr. Richard Hayes with expensive authority that couldn't disguise his own confusion about problems that defied conventional analysis methods. Dr. Hayes' computer models are only as accurate as their underlying assumptions. Dr. Boyd replied with engineering skepticism about theoretical approaches that might miss practical realities of complex system interactions. If our assumptions are wrong, our models will show normal operation even during catastrophic failure sequences. The exchange highlighted fundamental limitations of consulting approaches that relied on sophisticated analysis rather than hands-on investigation of actual hardware and real-world operating conditions. Dr. Archibald Frost entered the meeting room with the controlled desperation of someone whose empire was disintegrating despite unlimited resources and premium expertise. His afternoon had been consumed by conversations with investors, government officials, and industry competitors who were beginning to question his technical leadership and corporate competence. Dr. Boyd, I've just concluded discussions with NASA administrators who are considering contract termination unless we provide satisfactory explanations within 48 hours. Frost announced with executive authority that masked deep concern about losing everything he'd built through decades of aerospace industry dominance. Sir, we need more time for comprehensive investigation of system interaction possibilities. Dr. Boyd replied with professional honesty about technical challenges that couldn't be resolved through corporate pressure or arbitrary deadlines. Dr. Boyd, time is precisely what we don't have. Frost responded with business reality that prioritized immediate results over thorough investigation. NASA has alternative contractors ready to assume our responsibilities if we cannot demonstrate technical competence. The conversation was interrupted by an unexpected phone call from Dr. Velma Hudson, whose independent investigation for the military had revealed information that could affect both corporate strategy and government decision-making about American aerospace capabilities. Dr. Frost, in calling with preliminary findings from my military consultation, Dr. Hudson announced with professional authority that carried implications beyond simple technical assessment. The failure pattern suggests design integration issues rather than component malfunctions or impossible physics. The assessment provided Frost with his first potentially positive development in weeks of investigation that had produced only expensive confirmation of problems that seemed designed to resist conventional solution approaches. Dr. Hudson, what kind of design integration issues? Frost asked with executive attention to information that might salvage his company's reputation in government contracts. Fuel injection geometry that interferes with cooling system efficiency. Dr. Hudson replied with engineering precision that connected theoretical analysis with practical mechanical principles. The failure mode would be invisible to individual system testing but catastrophic during integrated operation. The explanation struck Frost as both promising and troubling, suggesting solutions that might be achievable while highlighting institutional failures that had prevented recognition of problems that competent investigation should have identified immediately. But that evening, Rose Campbell reviewed her science fair notes with renewed confidence that her fuel injection project provided relevant insights into rocket engine failures that professional investigators were missing through their focus on sophisticated explanations rather than basic mechanical principles. Mom, do you think Dr. Frost would listen to ideas from someone my age? Rose asked with practical curiosity about adult willingness to consider solutions from unexpected sources. Rose, powerful people sometimes have difficulty accepting help from anyone who challenges their authority. Helen replied with maternal honesty about institutional resistance to innovation that threatened established expertise and corporate hierarchies. But what if the ideas actually work? Rose persisted with logical directness that challenged adult assumptions about expertise and credentials. Then we'd learn something important about whether our society values results more than reputations. Helen answered with military understanding of how institutional politics could prevent mission accomplishment when bureaucratic concerns outweighed practical problem solving. The conversation established Rose's growing determination to contribute her mechanical insights to problems that seemed to demand exactly the kind of systematic thinking that her grandfather had taught her was essential for understanding how complex systems actually worked in real-world conditions rather than theoretical models. The crisp morning air carried unusual tension across Frost Aerospace's sprawling facility as security guards processed an unexpected visitor whose arrival had been arranged through channels that bypassed normal corporate protocols. Rose Campbell clutched a manila folder containing her science fair project documentation, detailed technical drawings, and theoretical analysis that she hoped might illuminate rocket engine failures from perspectives that professional consulting had overlooked. Dr. Velma Hudson met Rose and Captain Helen Campbell at the main security checkpoint with professional curiosity about meeting the 11-year-old whose mechanical insights had allegedly inspired her own investigation into systems integration problems that 30 experts had failed to recognize. "Rose, I appreciate you taking time from school to share your technical observations," Dr. Hudson said with consultant courtesy that acknowledged the unusual nature of soliciting aerospace advice from elementary school students. "Your fuel injection theories align with my independent analysis in ways that suggest we might be approaching similar conclusions through different methodologies." Rose studied the imposing corporate architecture with mechanical attention that noted design elements reflecting technological sophistication and institutional authority. The building's glass surfaces and steel framework suggested engineering precision that should have been capable of solving problems that seemed to demand systematic thinking rather than expensive expertise. "Dr. Hudson, has anyone actually looked at the physical hardware since the explosion?" Rose asked with practical curiosity about investigation approaches that might emphasize data analysis over hands-on examination of actual mechanical components. The question struck Dr. Hudson as surprisingly astute for someone Rose's age, highlighting potential gaps in consulting methodologies that relied on telemetry data and computer modeling rather than direct inspection of failed hardware. "Rose, most aerospace investigation focuses on recorded performance parameters rather than physical component analysis." Dr. Hudson replied with professional honesty about industry practices that might miss crucial evidence visible only through careful examination of actual machinery. Helen Campbell observed this exchange with growing maternal concern about her daughter's involvement in corporate politics that could expose Rose to disappointment or public embarrassment if her mechanical insights proved inadequate for solving problems that had defeated professional expertise. "Dr. Hudson, what exactly are we hoping to accomplish today?" Helen asked with military directness that sought clear objectives rather than vague educational opportunities that might waste everyone's time. "Captain Campbell, we're hoping that fresh perspectives might illuminate aspects of this failure that institutional thinking has overlooked." Dr. Hudson replied with consultant diplomacy that balanced optimism against realistic assessment of challenging technical problems. The security escort led them through corridors lined with displays showcasing Frost Aerospace's technological achievements and government contracts, creating an atmosphere of corporate success that contrasted sharply with the crisis that had summoned Rose's mechanical expertise to address impossible problems. Dr. Archibald Frost waited in his executive conference room with the controlled impatience of someone whose empire was disintegrating despite unlimited resources and premium consultation. His morning had been consumed by urgent calls from NASA administrators, Pentagon officials, and board members whose collective pressure was transforming technical investigation into existential crisis for his entire aerospace operation. "Dr. Hudson, I trust you have substantive findings to report," Frost announced with executive authority that barely concealed desperate concern about his company's survival prospects. "NASA's deadline provides no margin for speculative theories or experimental consultation approaches. Dr. Frost, I'd like you to meet Rose Campbell, whose fuel system analysis has provided insights that may explain your rocket's failure mode." Dr. Hudson replied with professional courage that risked her own consulting reputation by introducing elementary school expertise to corporate crisis management. Frost stared at Rose with visible incredulity that someone her age could possibly contribute meaningful insights to aerospace problems that had defeated the industry's most qualified professionals. His expression reflected institutional assumptions about expertise and authority that had been reinforced through decades of corporate success. "Dr. Hudson, surely you're not suggesting that an 11-year-old child can solve technical problems that have baffled 30 aerospace engineers?" Frost said with condescending authority that dismissed unconventional approaches to problem solving before examining their potential value. "Sir, with respect, maybe that's exactly why I might see something they missed." Rose replied with quiet confidence that had been developed through years of solving mechanical problems that adults had declared impossible or impractical. The response struck Dr. Hudson as demonstrating exactly the kind of independent thinking that institutional education and corporate culture often suppressed in favor of conventional approaches that prioritized credentials over competence. "Young lady, aerospace engineering requires advanced mathematics, sophisticated materials science, and complex systems analysis that exceed elementary school curriculum by several decades," Frost replied with patronizing authority that revealed his fundamental assumptions about knowledge and capability. Rose opened her manila folder with systematic organization that reflected her grandfather's training and methodical approach to technical documentation and logical presentation of analytical findings. "Mr. Frost, could I show you my fuel injection project?" Rose asked with polite persistence that ignored adult condescension in favor of focusing on mechanical principles that transcended age and institutional authority. Rose, I don't have time for science fair demonstrations, Frost replied with executive dismissal that prioritized corporate urgency over potential solutions from unexpected sources. Dr. Hudson intervened with consultant authority that carried professional credibility despite her association with unconventional consultation approaches that challenged established expertise. Dr. Frost Rose's analysis identifies fuel spray pattern interactions with cooling system geometry that could explain catastrophic failure modes invisible to individual component testing. Dr. Hudson said with technical precision that connected Rose's elementary insights with sophisticated aerospace engineering principles. The explanation captured Frost's attention with its specific focus on system integration problems that his expensive consultants had failed to address through their emphasis on isolated component analysis rather than comprehensive mechanical understanding. Dr. Hudson explained this fuel spray theory Frost demanded with executive attention that reflected both skepticism and desperate willingness to consider any approach that might salvage his company's technical reputation and government contracts concepts. Then Rose spread her science fair drawings across the polished conference table with careful attention to visual presentation that would communicate complex principles through simple illustrations rather than mathematical equations that might obscure practical mechanical relationships. Mr. Frost, if your fuel injectors spray at the wrong angle, they can disrupt the cooling flow pattern and create hot spots that weaken the combustion chamber. Rose explained with systematic clarity that connected theoretical principles with practical consequences. Each system works fine by itself, but together they fight each other until something breaks. The explanation provided Frost with his first coherent theory about rocket failure that addressed actual mechanical cause and effect relationships rather than vague references to impossible technical mysteries or unprecedented engineering challenges. Young lady, how could cooling flow disruption create the kind of catastrophic failure that destroyed my entire rocket? Frost asked with growing interest in analysis that offered specific explanations rather than expensive confirmation of inexplicable problems. Because once the combustion chamber starts overheating, the metal expands and changes the fuel injection pattern even more, which makes the cooling problem worse, which makes the overheating worse until everything fails at once. Rose replied with mechanical logic that described progressive failure cascades through system feedback loops. Dr. Hudson watched this exchange with professional fascination at how Rose's simple explanations illuminated complex engineering principles that sophisticated analysis had failed to recognize through institutional focus on component performance rather than integrated system behavior. Dr. Frost Rose's feedback loop theory explains why your telemetry showed normal operation until catastrophic failure. Dr. Hudson observed with consultant authority that validated elementary insights through professional aerospace expertise. The failure progression would be invisible until it reached critical thresholds. Frost studied Rose's drawings with growing recognition that her systematic approach to fuel system analysis addressed exactly the kind of mechanical relationships that his expensive consultants had overlooked through their emphasis on sophisticated explanations rather than basic engineering principles. Miss Campbell, assuming your theory is correct, how would you suggest testing it? Frost asked with executive pragmatism that prioritized actionable solutions over theoretical discussions about complex technical problems. You'd need to look at the actual broken pieces to see if the metal shows heat stress patterns in the places my theory predicts. Rose replied with scientific methodology that emphasized physical evidence over computer modeling or mathematical analysis. The suggestion struck Frost as both obvious and revolutionary, representing exactly the kind of hands-on investigation that corporate consulting culture had replaced with expensive data analysis and theoretical modeling that might miss crucial evidence visible only through direct hardware examination. Dr. Hudson, have we conducted detailed metallurgical analysis of the wreckage? Frost asked with growing suspicion that his investigation had emphasized sophisticated approaches while neglecting fundamental examination of actual failed components. Dr. Frost, most analysis has focused on telemetry data and system modeling rather than physical component inspection. Dr. Hudson replied with professional honesty about consulting practices that prioritized elegant analysis over practical investigation methods. The admission confirmed Frost's worst fears about institutional expertise that had consumed millions in consulting fees while overlooking basic investigation approaches that elementary school science fair methodology would have included automatically. As Rose's unconventional insights began penetrating corporate aerospace thinking, powerful forces were mobilizing to protect established interests from innovative solutions that threatened profitable consulting relationships and institutional authority over American technological development. The secure warehouse facility that housed the rocket wreckage resembled an industrial morgue where twisted metal fragments lay arranged on examination tables under harsh fluorescent lighting that revealed details invisible during the chaos of the original explosion. Dr. Martha Boyd led the small group through rows of catalog debris with scientific precision that reflected weeks of careful documentation and frustrating analysis. Dr. Frost, we've organized the wreckage according to original component location and failure sequence timing. Dr. Boyd reported with professional competence that couldn't disguise her own confusion about destruction patterns that defied conventional aerospace failure analysis. Each piece has been photographed, measured, and tested according to standard metallurgical investigation protocols. Rose Campbell moved between the examination tables with systematic attention that her grandfather had taught her was essential for understanding how mechanical failures actually occurred rather than how theories suggested they should happen. Her young eyes examined metal surfaces with the kind of careful observation that institutional expertise sometimes overlooked in favor of sophisticated instrumentation and computer analysis. Dr. Boyd, which pieces came from the combustion chamber area? Rose asked with practical curiosity about physical evidence that might support or contradict her fuel injection interference theory. Dr. Boyd indicated a collection of severely damaged metal fragments that showed extreme thermal stress and structural deformation beyond normal operational parameters. The pieces reflected the kind of catastrophic failure that aerospace engineers feared most because it suggested fundamental design problems rather than corrigible component malfunctions. Miss Campbell, these fragments experienced temperatures well above design specifications. Dr. Boyd explained with technical precision that characterized her approach to evidence-based investigation. The metallurgy shows stress patterns that shouldn't occur during normal rocket operation. Rose studied the damaged metal with mechanical attention that connected visual evidence with theoretical understanding of how heat stress created specific deformation patterns in different materials under varying load conditions. Dr. Boyd, do the stress patterns show where the overheating started? Rose asked with scientific methodology that emphasized tracing failure progression through physical evidence rather than accepting general descriptions of catastrophic destruction. The question struck Dr. Boyd as surprisingly sophisticated for someone Rose's age, demonstrating understanding of metallurgical analysis that connected theoretical knowledge with practical investigation techniques. Dr. Boyd consulted her detailed examination notes with professional attention to documentation that had consumed weeks of careful analysis and measurement. Her findings represented the most comprehensive physical investigation that Frost Aerospace had conducted, though institutional pressure had emphasized data analysis over hands-on hardware examination. Miss Campbell, the most severe thermal damage originates from 3 specific locations within the combustion chamber. Dr. Boyd replied with technical precision that reflected systematic investigation of actual failure evidence. The pattern suggests localized overheating rather than general system-wide temperature elevation. Rose examined the locations. Dr. Boyd indicated with growing excitement about physical evidence that seemed to support her theoretical analysis of fuel injection and cooling system interference. The damaged metal showed exactly the kind of localized distress patterns that her science fair project had predicted would result from disrupted cooling flow. Dr. Boyd, are those 3 locations positioned where fuel injectors would spray directly into cooling flow channels? Rose asked with mechanical logic that connected her elementary school fuel system understanding with sophisticated aerospace engineering evidence. Dr. Boyd checked technical drawings against the physical wreckage locations with professional attention to correlating theoretical design specifications with actual hardware configuration. Her comparison revealed relationships that previous investigation had overlooked through focus on component testing rather than system integration analysis. Ms. Campbell, those locations do correspond exactly with fuel injector positioning relative to cooling system geometry. Dr. Boyd confirmed with growing amazement at 11-year-old insights that illuminated aerospace engineering problems through basic mechanical principles. Dr. Archibald Frost observed this exchange with conflicted emotions that balanced executive pride against uncomfortable recognition that elementary school analysis was revealing failures in his company's sophisticated investigation methodologies. His corporate empire had been built on premises of technological superiority that Rose's simple observations were beginning to challenge. Dr. Boyd, how could our investigation miss such obvious correlations between injector positioning and thermal damage patterns? Frost asked with executive concern about institutional competence that affected his company's reputation and market credibility. Sir, our analysis protocols emphasized individual system performance rather than integrated component interaction. Dr. Boyd replied with professional honesty about investigation approaches that might have prevented recognition of system-level problems. We tested fuel injection separately from cooling system efficiency. The admission confirmed Frost's growing suspicion that institutional expertise had become too specialized to recognize fundamental engineering relationships that required comprehensive mechanical understanding rather than departmental analysis approaches. Dr. Velma Hudson documented Rose's observations with consultant attention to evidence that could support independent assessment of Frost Aerospace's technical capabilities for military evaluation purposes. Her reputation depended on providing accurate analysis regardless of whether findings supported or contradicted corporate interests. Dr. Frost, Ms. Campbell's correlation between injector positioning and thermal damage provides the first coherent explanation for your rocket's failure mode, Dr. Hudson observed with professional authority that validated elementary insights through sophisticated aerospace expertise. Meanwhile, across the facility in the executive conference room, Congressman Horace Turner was conducting an unscheduled inspection visit that reflected Washington's growing concern about American aerospace industry competence and international technological competitiveness. His arrival had created additional pressure for immediate solutions to problems that threaten national security interests. Dr. Frost, the Pentagon is requesting detailed explanations about how a $50 million rocket can fail for reasons that 30 professional engineers cannot identify. Congressman Turner announced with political authority that carried implications for government contracts and federal aerospace investment strategies. Turner's aide whispered urgent information about developments in the warehouse that could affect congressional assessment of Frost Aerospace's technical competence and problem-solving capabilities. Congressman, there are reports that an 11-year-old child is providing technical analysis in your investigation facility. The aide reported with political concern about public relations implications of unusual consultation approaches. Turner's expression reflected the kind of institutional skepticism that characterized political responses to unconventional approaches that challenged established expertise and bureaucratic protocols for managing complex technical problems. Dr. Frost, surely you're not relying on elementary school consultation for aerospace engineering problems. Turner said with congressional authority that prioritized conventional approaches over innovative problem-solving methodologies. Back in the warehouse, Rose continued her systematic examination of physical evidence with growing confidence that her fuel injection theory explained not just the rocket's failure, but the investigation's inability to recognize obvious mechanical relationships that connected multiple engineering systems. Dr. Boyd, if you change the fuel injector angles by just a few degrees, would that prevent the cooling system interference? Rose asked with practical curiosity about solutions that might address root causes rather than symptomatic problems. Dr. Boyd consulted engineering drawings with technical attention to modification possibilities that could address system integration problems without requiring complete design overhaul or extensive development delays. Ms. Campbell, minor injector angle adjustments could theoretically eliminate cooling flow disruption while maintaining fuel distribution efficiency. Quote, Dr. Boyd replied with engineering assessment that suggested practical solutions might be achievable through relatively simple modifications. Honas, the possibility of straightforward technical solutions struck Dr. Frost as both promising and embarrassing, suggesting that his company's crisis might be resolved through basic engineering adjustments rather than the sophisticated redesign efforts that expensive consultants had recommended. Dr. Boyd, what would be required to test Ms. Campbell's modification theory? Frost asked with executive pragmatism that prioritized actionable solutions over institutional concerns about accepting technical advice from elementary school students. Sir, we could manufacture modified injectors and conduct controlled testing within 2 weeks. Dr. Boyd replied with professional competence that reflected her genuine commitment to solving technical problems regardless of their intellectual source. The timeline provided Frost with his first realistic hope for meeting NASA's deadline while restoring his company's technical credibility through demonstrated problem-solving capability rather than expensive explanations for impossible failures. Dr. Boyd authorized immediate prototype development for Ms. Campbell's injector modification design. Frost commanded with executive authority that prioritized results over conventional consultation processes. Rose felt a surge of excitement about seeing her theoretical analysis translated into actual aerospace hardware that might prove whether elementary school mechanical understanding could solve problems that institutional expertise had failed to address. Mr. Frost, could I help with the testing? Rose asked with scientific enthusiasm that reflected genuine curiosity about validation processes rather than personal recognition or publicity seeking. Ms. Campbell, I believe your assistance would be invaluable for ensuring that our testing accurately reflects your theoretical framework. Frost replied with growing respect for insights that had illuminated his company's technical problems through approaches that expensive expertise had overlooked. As Rose's elementary school fuel injection theory moved toward practical implementation, powerful forces in Washington were mobilizing to prevent unconventional solutions from undermining established aerospace industry relationships and institutional control over American technological development that affected billions in government contracts and international strategic positioning. The machining facility at Frost Aerospace hummed with urgent activity as precision technicians worked around the clock to manufacture fuel injectors based on Rose Campbell's modified design specifications. Chief Machinist Walter Thompson supervised the delicate process with 40 years of aerospace manufacturing experience that had taught him to recognize when theoretical engineering translated into practical hardware solutions. Ms. Campbell, these injector angles represent a significant departure from conventional rocket engine design, Walter observed as he calibrated the computerized milling equipment that would create Rose's modified components. The fuel spray pattern will be completely different from standard aerospace engineering approaches. Rose studied the machining process with fascination at how her elementary school drawings were being transformed into sophisticated metal components through precision manufacturing techniques that represented the pinnacle of American industrial capability. Mr. Thompson, will the different spray pattern affect engine power? Rose asked with practical curiosity about whether her cooling system solution might create new problems in other areas of rocket performance. Ms. Campbell, according to our computer simulations, your modified injectors should actually improve combustion efficiency while solving the thermal management problems. Walter replied with professional assessment that had surprised everyone involved in the modification project. The unexpected performance benefits struck Rose's confirmation that systematic mechanical thinking often revealed solutions that provided multiple improvements rather than simple problem fixes that required compromise between competing design requirements. Dr. Martha Boyd entered the machining facility with test data that represented the first comprehensive analysis of Rose's theoretical framework using Frost Aerospace's sophisticated computer modeling capabilities. Her findings would determine whether elementary school insights could survive professional aerospace engineering validation. Rose, our thermodynamic modeling confirms that your injector modifications eliminate cooling flow interference while increasing fuel atomization efficiency by 12. Dr. Boyd announced with professional enthusiasm that reflected both technical validation and personal relief at finally understanding her company's rocket failure. Dr. Boyd, does that mean the rocket will work better than before? Rose asked with scientific curiosity about whether problem solving could lead to genuine improvement rather than just returning to previous performance levels. Rose, your modifications should make this rocket engine significantly more reliable and efficient than our original design. Dr. Boyd confirmed with engineering appreciation for insights that had emerged from basic mechanical understanding rather than sophisticated aerospace consulting. The validation provided Rose with deep satisfaction about contributing meaningful improvements to American space technology through approaches that connected practical mechanical principles with advanced engineering applications. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Congressman Horace Turner was convening an emergency hearing that reflected congressional concern about aerospace industry competence and the political implications of accepting technical solutions from sources outside established contractor networks. Gentlemen, we're facing a situation where American space technology supremacy appears to depend on consultation from an 11-year-old child. Turner announced to assembled defense industry representatives with political authority that prioritized institutional credibility over technical innovation. Defense contractor lobbyist Harrison Blackwood shifted uncomfortably in his chair as he recognized threats to consulting relationships that generated billions in government contracts through systems designed to maintain aerospace industry influence over federal space investment decisions. Congressman Turner allowing civilian consultation outside established security protocols could set dangerous precedents for defense technology development. Blackwood warned with corporate concern about losing institutional control over government aerospace spending. Mr. Blackwood, what specific security concerns are raised by consulting with American citizens about mechanical engineering principles? Turner asked with political directness that sought specific justifications rather than vague institutional objections. Blackwood struggled to articulate security concerns that didn't simply reflect corporate interests in maintaining expensive consulting monopolies over government aerospace problems, understanding that his influence depended on preserving barriers to innovative competition. Back at Frost Aerospace, the modified fuel injectors had been installed in a test engine that would provide definitive validation of Rose's theoretical analysis through actual hardware performance measurement. The testing facility buzzed with excitement about potentially solving problems that had threatened American space program credibility. Dr. Frost, we're ready to begin controlled testing of Ms. Campbell's injector modifications, announced test engineer Lieutenant Grant Fisher, whose military assignment to monitor the investigation had provided him with front-row access to breakthrough aerospace innovation. Rose positioned herself at the observation window with scientific anticipation about seeing her fuel injection theory validated through actual rocket engine operation under controlled conditions that would prove whether elementary school mechanical understanding could solve professional aerospace problems. Lieutenant Fisher, what exactly will this test demonstrate? Rose asked with educational curiosity about validation procedures that would determine whether her insights translated into practical engineering solutions. Ms. Campbell will measure thrust production, thermal distribution, and fuel efficiency across the entire operational spectrum, Lieutenant Fisher explained with technical precision that reflected comprehensive testing protocols. If your theory is correct, we should see improved performance in all categories. The engine ignition sequence proceeded with textbook precision as fuel systems activated, cooling pumps engaged, and ignition sparked the controlled combustion that would validate or refute weeks of theoretical analysis and mechanical intuition. Dr. Frost's initial readings show stable combustion with thermal patterns exactly matching Miss Campbell's predictions. Dr. Boyd reported with professional excitement about seeing theoretical analysis confirmed through actual hardware performance. Rose watched telemetry displays with growing amazement at how her simple observations about fuel injection and cooling system interactions were being validated by sophisticated measurement equipment that confirmed every aspect of her elementary school analysis. Dr. Boyd thrust production is 18.0% above design specifications. Lieutenant Fisher announced with military enthusiasm about performance improvements that exceeded expectations for problem-solving outcomes. The unexpected performance gain struck everyone present as confirmation that Rose's systematic approach to mechanical problems had revealed aerospace engineering opportunities that expensive consulting had failed to recognize through institutional focus on complex explanations rather than basic principles. Miss Campbell, your modifications have not only solved our failure problem, but significantly improved our rocket's overall performance, Dr. Frost said with executive gratitude that reflected both professional respect and personal amazement. At 11-year-old insights that had saved his aerospace empire, Rose felt deep satisfaction about proving that careful mechanical thinking could contribute meaningful improvements to sophisticated technology through approaches that prioritized understanding over credentials and results over institutional authority. The celebration was interrupted by urgent communication from corporate security about developments in Washington that could affect implementation of Rose's solutions regardless of their technical merit or performance validation. Dr. Frost, Congressman Turner is demanding immediate suspension of testing pending congressional review of security implications. Security Chief Robert Hayes reported with corporate concern about political interference in technical validation processes. Chief Hayes, on what grounds can Congress interfere with private sector testing of American aerospace technology? Dr. Frost asked with executive frustration about bureaucratic obstacles to implementing solutions that had proven technically successful. Sir, national security provisions allow congressional oversight of any aerospace development that could affect American technological competitiveness. Chief Hayes replied with legal assessment of political authority over private industry innovation. The intervention struck Rose as fundamentally unfair to preventing solutions that work simply because they came from unexpected sources that challenged established institutional relationships and consulting monopolies. Mr. Frost, why would anyone want to stop improvements that make American rockets work better? Rose asked with 11-year-old directness that cut through political complexity towards simple moral questions about supporting innovation versus protecting institutional interests. Rose, sometimes powerful people prefer familiar problems over unfamiliar solutions, Dr. Frost replied with honest assessment of political dynamics that prioritized institutional stability over technical innovation and problem-solving effectiveness. Dr. Velma Hudson approached the group with classified information from her military consultation that provided context for congressional intervention in private sector aerospace development decisions. Dr. Frost, my Pentagon contacts indicate that defense contractors are lobbying against civilian involvement in aerospace technology development. Dr. Hudson reported with consultant authority about political maneuvering behind congressional oversight demands. Dr. Hudson, are they opposing Miss Campbell's solutions because they don't work or because they work too well? Dr. Frost asked with business acumen that recognized competitive threats to established aerospace industry relationships. Sir, they're opposing solutions that demonstrate how expensive consulting failed to address basic engineering problems that elementary school analysis could solve. Dr. Hudson replied with professional honesty about institutional motivations that prioritized corporate interests over technical innovation. As political forces mobilized to prevent implementation of Rose's aerospace improvements, the battle for American technological supremacy was transforming from engineering challenge into institutional warfare between innovation and authority. With an 11-year-old girl's mechanical insights at the center of forces that would determine whether democratic societies could adapt quickly enough to maintain competitive advantages in rapidly changing technological environments. Investigative journalist Celeste Ward arrived at Horizon Valley Elementary School with recording equipment and professional determination to document how institutional barriers could prevent innovative solutions from reaching problems that threatened American technological leadership. Her afternoon interview with Rose Campbell would either expose corporate corruption or reveal the limitations of elementary school expertise applied to sophisticated aerospace challenges. Rose, how does it feel to know that your rocket engine improvements are being blocked by people in Washington? Celeste asked with journalistic directness that sought honest emotional responses rather than coached public relations statements. Rose sat in Principal Edith Barnes' office with the composed attention of someone whose mechanical thinking had prepared her for adult political complexity through systematic problem-solving approaches that prioritized logical analysis over emotional reactions. "Miss Ward, I don't understand why anyone would want to prevent rockets from working better," Rose replied with 11-year-old clarity that cut through political sophistication toward fundamental questions about institutional motivations and social priorities. "Rose, some people think that children shouldn't be involved in important government decisions," Celeste explained with reporter honesty about age discrimination that reflected broader questions about expertise, authority, and democratic participation in technological development. "But if the ideas work, why does it matter who thinks of them?" Rose persisted with scientific logic that challenged arbitrary barriers to innovation based on institutional prejudice rather than practical evaluation of technical merit. The question struck Celeste as encapsulating fundamental tensions between democratic ideals and bureaucratic reality that characterized American institutional responses to challenges requiring adaptive thinking rather than conventional approaches. Principal Edith Barnes observed this interview with educational pride tempered by protective concern about exposing Rose to public attention that could either enhance or damage her future opportunities for intellectual development and academic advancement. Ms. Ward, Rose has demonstrated exceptional mechanical understanding, but she's still a child who needs protection from adult political pressures, Principal Barnes said with administrative authority that balanced recognition of student achievement against institutional responsibility for child welfare. Meanwhile, at Edwards Air Force Base, Colonel Russell Gibson was conducting his own investigation into political interference that threatened military assessment of aerospace innovations critical for national security and international technological competitiveness. "Lieutenant Fisher, what's your professional evaluation of Miss Campbell's rocket modifications?" Colonel Gibson asked with command attention to technical merit rather than political implications of accepting civilian consultation from unconventional sources. "Sir, the performance improvements are undeniable," Lieutenant Fisher replied with military honesty that prioritized operational effectiveness over bureaucratic convenience. Her modifications solved the failure problem while increasing engine efficiency beyond original design specifications. "Lieutenant, how do we reconcile exceptional technical results with congressional demands for suspension of civilian consultation?" Colonel Gibson asked with command responsibility for balancing political authority against military requirements for technological superiority. "Colonel, respectfully, our mission is defending American interests through superior capability, not protecting corporate consulting relationships," Lieutenant Fisher replied with professional courage that reflected military values often at odds with political considerations. The assessment confirmed Colonel Gibson's own conviction that military effectiveness required supporting innovation regardless of its source when national security depended on maintaining technological advantages over international competitors. At Frost Aerospace's corporate headquarters, Dr. Archibald Frost was discovering that his company's technical breakthrough was being overshadowed by political controversy that threatened to destroy both his business empire and Rose Campbell's contribution to American space technology advancement. "Sir, 3 major government contracts are under review pending resolution of the consultation controversy," announced Corporate Communications Director Sandra Pierce with professional concern about public relations disasters that could affect long-term business relationships. "Miss Pierce, are we being penalized for solving technical problems or for solving them through unconventional methods?" Frost asked with executive frustration about institutional responses that seemed to prioritize process over results and politics over performance. "Sir, the controversy centers on precedents being set for civilian involvement in classified aerospace development," Ms. Pierce replied with diplomatic explanation of political concerns that transcended immediate technical considerations. Frost recognized that his company's survival now depended not just on engineering competence, but on navigating institutional politics that could prevent implementation of solutions that had proven technically superior to expensive consulting alternatives. Dr. Martha Boyd entered the executive suite with technical documentation that provided comprehensive validation of cross-modifications through testing protocols that exceeded standard aerospace industry requirements for performance verification and safety assessment. "Dr. For Frost, I have complete test results that confirm Miss Campbell's modifications provide significant improvements across all performance categories," Dr. Boyd announced with professional enthusiasm that reflected both technical achievement and personal vindication of supporting unconventional approaches. "Dr. Boyd, can these results overcome political objections to civilian consultation?" Frost asked with business pragmatism that sought practical solutions to bureaucratic obstacles that threaten technical innovation. Sir, the performance data speaks for itself, but political decisions often ignore technical merit when institutional interests are threatened. Dr. Boyd replied with engineering realism about how corporate and government bureaucracy sometimes prevented optimal solutions from being implemented. Back in Horizon Valley, Rose Campbell was experiencing the strange sensation of becoming famous for mechanical insights that seemed perfectly obvious to her, but apparently revolutionary to adult aerospace professionals who had missed basic engineering relationships. Rose reporters are calling from newspapers and television stations across the country. Captain Helen Campbell reported with maternal concern about media attention that could overwhelm her 11-year-old daughter's normal childhood development. "Mom, why is everyone so interested in fuel injection patterns?" Rose asked with genuine curiosity about a dull fascination with mechanical principles that she considered fundamental to understanding how engines worked properly. "Sweetheart, because you solved a problem that experts said was impossible," Helen replied with honest explanation of how Rose's achievement challenged institutional assumptions about expertise and capability. "But it wasn't impossible. It was just fuel spraying in the wrong direction," Rose said with characteristic directness that reduced complex aerospace engineering to basic mechanical principles that anyone could understand through careful observation. The conversation was interrupted by Derek Coleman's arrival with information from online aerospace forums where professional engineers were debating the political implications of Rose's technical breakthrough for American aerospace industry competitiveness. "Rose, you should see what these engineers are posting," Derek announced with adolescent excitement about his friend's growing reputation among professional aerospace communities. "They're saying your modifications could revolutionize rocket engine design if they're allowed to be implemented." "Derek, what do you mean if they're allowed?" Rose asked with practical concern about whether political interference could prevent technical improvements from being applied to American space technology. "Some engineers think corporate interests will prevent your ideas from being used because they make expensive consulting look unnecessary," Derek explained with teenage understanding of adult political motivations that prioritized institutional protection over innovation. The explanation struck Rose as fundamentally wrong about how American society should operate, suggesting that political systems might prevent progress rather than enabling it when established interests felt threatened by superior solutions from unexpected sources. "Derek, wouldn't America want the best rockets possible regardless of who designs them?" Rose asked with patriotic logic that assumed national interests would override corporate considerations when technological superiority was at stake. "Rose, that's what everyone hopes, but sometimes powerful people care more about staying powerful than about making things better," Derek replied with adolescent cynicism about institutional behavior that often disappointed idealistic expectations. At the Desert Springs Diner, community members were organizing grassroots support for Rose's contributions to American aerospace technology through informal networks that connected military families, defense contractors, and local businesses whose economic security depended on maintaining regional technological prominence. "Folks, we can't let Washington politics prevent one of our own from contributing to American space capability," declared retired Air Force Sergeant Bill Rodriguez with veteran authority that commanded respect from diverse community constituencies. Bill's right agreed diner owner Iris Powell with community leadership that reflected decades of coordinating local response to external challenges. "Rose's achievements reflect well on our entire valley and our commitment to supporting innovative thinking." The gathering represented exactly the kind of democratic grassroots mobilization that American political tradition celebrated in theory, but often resisted in practice when established interests felt threatened by citizen participation in complex policy decisions. Mayor Norma Sullivan entered the diner with political information about state-level support that could provide alternative pathways for implementing Rose's aerospace innovations despite federal bureaucratic resistance to civilian consultation in sensitive technology development. "Friends, I've been in contact with Governor Peterson's office about supporting Rose's contributions to California aerospace industry development," Mayor Sullivan announced with political authority that reflected both local pride and economic development strategy. "Norma, can state government override federal restrictions on aerospace technology consultation?" asked small business owner Tom Bradley with practical concern about jurisdictional complexities that could affect implementation of locally developed innovations. "Tom, California has significant aerospace industry influence that could provide political leverage for supporting citizen innovation versus corporate consulting monopolies," Mayor Sullivan replied with political understanding of how federal systems sometimes allowed state initiative to challenge national bureaucratic resistance. As grassroots support mobilized across Horizon Valley, Rose Campbell found herself at the center of political forces that would determine whether American democratic institutions could adapt quickly enough to support innovation from unexpected sources. when national technological competitiveness required embracing rather than resisting unconventional solutions to complex problems that traditional expertise had failed to solve effectively. NASA Administrator Dr. Patricia Morgan arrived at Frost Aerospace under extraordinary circumstances that reflected the space's desperate need for reliable propulsion systems before international partners lost confidence in American technological leadership. Her unannounced visit carried implications that extended far beyond corporate consultation into questions about national space program credibility and strategic independence. Dr. Frost, I'm here to personally evaluate the technical solutions that have generated so much political controversy. Dr. Morgan announced with federal authority that transcended congressional interference when American space capabilities required immediate assessment and decision-making. Dr. Frost met the NASA administrator in his private conference room with documentation that represented the most comprehensive validation of aerospace technology improvements in his company's 40-year history. The test results provided irrefutable evidence that Rose Campbell's modifications had solved fundamental engineering problems while enhancing overall performance. Dr. Morgan, Ms. Campbell's fuel injector modifications have eliminated our failure mode while improving thrust efficiency by 18. Dr. Frost reported with executive confidence that reflected both technical achievement and personal transformation from skeptical authority to genuine advocate for innovative thinking. Dr. Frost, NASA's primary concern is reliability rather than performance enhancement. Dr. Morgan replied with federal pragmatism that prioritized mission success over technological advancement when American space program credibility depended on consistent results rather than breakthrough capabilities. Dr. Morgan, reliability and performance are interconnected when system integration problems create failure modes that conventional analysis cannot detect. Dr. Velma Hudson interjected with consultant authority that connected Rose's insights with broader aerospace engineering principles. Dr. Morgan studied the comprehensive test documentation with professional attention that had been developed through 3 decades of evaluating aerospace technology claims against actual performance capabilities under demanding operational conditions. Dr. Hudson, these performance improvements are remarkable, but NASA cannot base mission-critical decisions on consultation from elementary school students. Dr. Morgan said with institutional responsibility that balanced technical merit against bureaucratic accountability for federal space program decisions. The response reflected exactly the kind of institutional thinking that had prevented recognition of Rose's insights until corporate desperation forced consideration of unconventional approaches to solving problems that expensive expertise had failed to address. Rose Campbell entered the conference room with quiet confidence that had been strengthened by weeks of seeing her mechanical understanding validated through sophisticated testing and professional recognition from aerospace engineers who understood practical engineering better than political protocols. Dr. Morgan, I'm Rose Campbell, she said with polite directness that ignored adult assumptions about age and expertise in favor of focusing on technical communication and problem-solving effectiveness. Dr. Morgan studied Rose with professional curiosity about meeting the 11-year-old whose mechanical insights had reportedly solved aerospace problems that NASA's most qualified contractors had declared impossible to understand or prevent. Ms. Campbell, I understand you believe you solved our rocket engine failure problem. Dr. Morgan said with diplomatic courtesy that balanced respect for individual achievement against institutional skepticism about unconventional consultation approaches. Dr. Morgan, I noticed that fuel spraying into cooling channels creates hot spots that make engines break. Rose replied with characteristic simplicity that reduced complex aerospace engineering to basic mechanical principles that anyone could understand through careful observation. The explanation struck Dr. Morgan as both elementary and profound, demonstrating understanding that connected multiple engineering disciplines through practical mechanical insight rather than theoretical analysis that might miss fundamental relationships. Ms. Campbell, how did you recognize system interactions that professional engineers overlooked? Dr. Morgan asked with genuine curiosity about analytical approaches that had succeeded where institutional expertise failed. Dr. Morgan, I learned to look at whole engines instead of just individual parts. Rose replied with systematic thinking that her grandfather had taught her was essential for understanding how complex machinery actually worked in integrated operational environments. Dr. Morgan recognized that Rose's holistic approach represented exactly the kind of comprehensive systems thinking that modern aerospace development often lost through institutional specialization and departmental analysis that prevented recognition of interdisciplinary relationships. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., an emergency session of the House Defense Appropriations Committee was addressing political pressure from aerospace industry lobbyists who viewed Rose's breakthrough as threatening established consulting relationships that generated billions in government contracts. Congressman Turner, we must consider the implications of bypassing established aerospace industry consultation protocols. warned committee member Congressman Richard Hayes with political concern about precedents that could affect future defense contractor relationships and campaign contribution patterns. Congressman Hayes, our responsibility is ensuring American technological superiority, not protecting corporate consulting monopolies. Turner replied with surprising political courage that prioritized national interests over industry relationships when space program credibility required supporting innovation regardless of its source. The exchange reflected growing congressional recognition that American technological competitiveness might require embracing unconventional solutions when conventional approaches had failed to address critical national security challenges and international strategic positioning. Defense Industry Representative Harrison Blackwood testified with corporate authority that masked deeper concerns about losing institutional control over government aerospace spending and technology development decision-making processes. Congressmen allowing civilian consultation outside established security frameworks could compromise sensitive technology and create dangerous precedents for defense industry relationships. Blackwood warned with professional concern that prioritized institutional stability over innovation and problem-solving effectiveness. Mr. Blackwood, what specific technology has been compromised by Ms. Campbell's fuel injection analysis? Congressman Turner asked with political directness that exposed the weakness of security arguments that couldn't identify actual classified information disclosure. Blackwood struggled to articulate security concerns that transcended corporate interests in maintaining expensive consulting barriers to innovation that threaten profitable relationships with government aerospace agencies and military procurement systems. Back at Frost Aerospace, Dr. Martha Boyd was conducting final validation testing of Rose's modifications using the most demanding operational parameters that simulated actual space mission conditions rather than controlled laboratory environments that might misreload performance variables. Dr. Frost, Ms. Campbell's injector modifications maintain optimal performance across the entire operational spectrum. Dr. Boyd reported with professional enthusiasm that reflected both technical achievement and personal satisfaction at implementing innovative solutions that had emerged from systematic mechanical thinking. Dr. Boyd, are you confident recommending these modifications for NASA mission-critical applications? Dr. Frost asked with executive responsibility for ensuring that his company's technical recommendations could withstand the demanding requirements of actual space operations. Sir, I'm more confident in these modifications than in our original design because they address fundamental system integration issues that we never fully understood until Ms. Campbell explained them. Dr. Boyd replied with engineering honesty about how Rose's insights had illuminated aerospace problems that institutional expertise had failed to recognize. Dr. Patricia Morgan observed this technical discussion with growing appreciation for how elementary school mechanical understanding had revealed aerospace engineering opportunities that sophisticated analysis had overlooked through focus on individual components rather than integrated system performance. Dr. Boyd, NASA requires comprehensive documentation before approving any propulsion system modifications. Dr. Morgan said with federal procedure that ensured thorough evaluation of technology changes that could affect mission success and astronaut safety. Dr. Morgan, we have complete test documentation that exceeds standard NASA validation requirements. Dr. Boyd replied with professional competence that reflected weeks of careful measurement and analysis designed to satisfy the most demanding aerospace industry standards. Rose watched this adult conversation with growing understanding that her simple observations about fuel injection had become the center of complex institutional negotiations that balanced technical merit against political authority and innovation against established expertise. Dr. Morgan, will NASA use my fuel injector improvements? Rose asked with direct curiosity about whether her mechanical insights would actually contribute to American space program advancement or remain theoretical achievements that political barriers prevented from practical implementation. Ms. Campbell, NASA's decision will be based on technical merit rather than political considerations. Dr. Morgan replied with federal authority that committed the space agency to supporting innovation when national technological leadership required embracing superior solutions regardless of their unconventional origins. The commitment provided Rose with confidence that her mechanical understanding could contribute meaningful improvements to American aerospace capability. An institutional courage overcame bureaucratic resistance to recognizing that innovation often emerged from unexpected sources that challenged established assumptions about expertise and authority. As NASA's evaluation process moved toward final decision-making, the battle between innovation and institution was approaching its climactic resolution with Rose Campbell's elementary school fuel injection insights at the center of forces that would determine whether American democratic institutions could adapt quickly enough to maintain technological superiority through supporting rather than suppressing unconventional approaches to complex problems that traditional expertise had failed to solve effectively. 6 months after Rose Campbell's fuel injection modifications had transformed American aerospace engineering, the Mojave Desert Test Range witnessed the most successful rocket launch in Frost Aerospace's corporate history. The pristine morning air carried no trace of the burned metal smell that had characterized the original explosion, replaced instead by the clean exhaust signature of perfectly balanced combustion that validated elementary school mechanical thinking through sophisticated technological achievement. Dr. Archibald Frost stood in the Mission Control Center with genuine humility that replaced his former corporate arrogance, watching telemetry displays that showed flawless engine performance throughout the critical launch sequence. His company's resurrection had required acknowledging that wisdom could emerge from unexpected sources when institutional expertise proved inadequate for solving fundamental problems. Mission control, all systems nominal, fuel injection patterns optimal, thermal management perfect, reported Flight Director Captain Sandra Mitchell with professional satisfaction that reflected months of preparation for validating Rose's modifications under actual space mission conditions. Rose Campbell observed the launch from the VIP viewing area with quiet satisfaction that her simple observations about fuel spray patterns had contributed to American space program advancement through systematic mechanical thinking that connected practical understanding with theoretical aerospace engineering principles. Rose, how does it feel to see your ideas working in real space missions? Asked Celeste Ward, whose investigative journalism had documented how institutional barriers could either prevent or enable innovation depending on whether democratic institutions supported merit over political convenience. Ms. Ward, it feels good to know that understanding how things work can help make them work better. Rose replied with characteristic modesty that prioritized practical problem solving over personal recognition or publicity seeking. Dr. Patricia Morgan approached Cross family with official documentation that represented NASA's formal adoption of Rose's fuel injection principles across multiple rocket engine development programs that would define American space capabilities for the next generation of exploration missions. Rose, NASA is implementing your modification methodology in 6 different rocket engine designs. Dr. Morgan announced with federal authority that validated innovative thinking through institutional recognition and practical application. Your systematic approach to fuel injection analysis has become standard aerospace engineering practice. The acknowledgement provided Rose with deep satisfaction about contributing lasting improvements to American technological capability through approaches that emphasized understanding over credentials and results over institutional authority. Captain Helen Campbell watched her daughter receive professional recognition with maternal pride that balanced personal satisfaction against protective concern about pressures that could affect Rose's continued intellectual development and normal childhood experiences. Dr. Morgan, what does this mean for Rose's future educational opportunities? Helen asked with practical concern about ensuring that her daughter's exceptional abilities received appropriate nurturing without overwhelming her with adult expectations or institutional demands. Captain Campbell, several universities have expressed interest in developing specialized programs that could accommodate Rose's mechanical talents while maintaining appropriate social and emotional development support. Dr. Morgan replied with educational understanding that recognized exceptional students required individualized approaches rather than conventional academic frameworks. Principal Edith Barnes had traveled from Horizon Valley to witness Rose's triumph with educational pride that validated her school's commitment to supporting gifted students whose intellectual capabilities exceeded standard curriculum limitations and institutional assumptions about age-appropriate learning. Rose Horizon Valley Elementary is establishing a new engineering program inspired by your systematic approach to mechanical problem solving. Principal Barnes announced with academic enthusiasm that reflected institutional adaptation to accommodate innovative thinking that emerged from unexpected sources. Derek Coleman stood beside his friend with adolescent amazement at witnessing Rose's transformation from curious 11-year-old to nationally recognized aerospace innovator whose insights had challenged professional expertise and institutional authority through persistent application of basic mechanical principles. Rose, you're going to be famous in engineering textbooks, Derek observed with teenage directness that acknowledged his friend's historical significance for demonstrating how systematic thinking could overcome institutional barriers to innovation and problem solving. Derek, I just want to keep learning how things work and maybe help fix problems that need solving. Rose replied with genuine humility that prioritized continued learning over fame or recognition that might interfere with her fundamental curiosity about mechanical systems and engineering challenges. Clarence Campbell watched his granddaughter's success with grandfather's pride that connected her achievements with decades of patient instruction in systematic mechanical thinking and logical problem-solving approaches that emphasized understanding over memorization and practical application over theoretical knowledge. Rose, you've proven that the best solutions often come from the most fundamental understanding. Clarence reflected with wisdom that connected mechanical principles with broader lessons about learning, innovation, and the relationship between curiosity and competence. Dr. Velma Hudson observed the celebration with consultant satisfaction that her independent investigation had helped bridge the gap between elementary school insights and professional aerospace engineering through objective evaluation that prioritized technical merit over institutional prejudice and age discrimination. Rose's success demonstrates why independent thinking matters more than expensive consultation when complex problems require fresh perspectives. Dr. Hudson commented with professional honesty about how institutional expertise could sometimes prevent recognition of simple solutions that challenged established approaches in consulting relationships. Congressman Horace Turner had also attended the launch with political understanding that Rose's achievement represented successful democratic adaptation to technological challenges through supporting individual innovation rather than protecting corporate consulting monopolies that had failed to serve national interests effectively. Ms. Campbell, Congress is considering legislation to ensure that American innovation receives support regardless of its source. Congressman Turner announced with political courage that reflected lessons learned about institutional responsibility for nurturing rather than suppressing unconventional thinking that could enhance national technological competitiveness. Hunger Spears, the legislative proposal, struck Rose as confirmation that democratic institutions could adapt to support innovation when individual achievement demonstrated the value of embracing rather than resisting challenges to established expertise and authority structures. Dr. Martha Boyd approached Rose's family with technical documentation that showed how the fuel injection principles had been incorporated into multiple aerospace applications beyond rocket engines, including aircraft propulsion systems and industrial combustion equipment that would benefit from systematic attention to fuel spray pattern optimization. Rose, your analytical approach has applications across multiple engineering disciplines, Dr. Boyd explained with professional enthusiasm that reflected continuing discovery of how basic mechanical understanding could illuminate complex technological challenges through systematic thinking and careful observation. The broader applications provided Rose with understanding that mechanical principles transcended specific technologies when systematic analytical approaches connected fundamental physical relationships with practical engineering solutions across diverse applications and industrial contexts. Mayor Norma Sullivan had organized a community celebration that reflected Horizon Valley's pride in Rose's achievements and their broader significance for demonstrating how small communities could contribute to national technological advancement through supporting rather than suppressing exceptional individual talent and innovative thinking. Friends, Rose Campbell's success reflects our community's commitment to nurturing innovation and supporting young people whose talents can contribute to American technological leadership. Mayor Sullivan declared with civic pride that connected individual achievement with collective community values and democratic ideals. The community celebration represented exactly the kind of grassroots support that enabled exceptional individuals to overcome institutional barriers and contribute their talents to national progress, and local social networks provided encouragement and practical assistance for challenging established assumptions about expertise and authority. As the rocket achieved orbital velocity with flawless performance that validated months of careful engineering and testing, Rose Campbell found herself reflecting on how simple curiosity about mechanical systems had led to insights that challenged professional expertise while contributing meaningful improvements to American aerospace technology. Grandpa, what should I work on next? Rose asked with scientific curiosity that remained focused on continued learning and problem-solving rather than resting on previous achievements or recognition that might interfere with her fundamental passion for understanding how complex systems actually worked. Rose, there are always more mechanical mysteries that need systematic thinking and careful observation. Clarence replied with grandfather's wisdom that emphasized continued intellectual growth over completed achievement. The important thing is maintaining curiosity about how things work and why they sometimes don't work the way people expect. Dr. Archibald Frost approached Rose's family with executive gratitude that reflected personal transformation from corporate arrogance to genuine appreciation for innovation that had saved his aerospace empire through elementary school mechanical insights that professional expertise had failed to recognize or implement. Ms. Campbell Frost Aerospace is establishing a research fellowship program to support young innovators whose systematic thinking can contribute to solving complex engineering challenges. Dr. Frost announced with corporate commitment to supporting rather than suppressing unconventional approaches to technological development and problem solving. The fellowship program represented institutional recognition that innovation often emerged from unexpected sources when systematic thinking challenged established assumptions about expertise and authority, creating opportunities for continued advancement through supporting rather than restricting creative problem-solving approaches. As the successful rocket mission concluded with perfect orbital insertion and flawless system performance, Rose Campbell understood that her elementary school fuel injection project had evolved into lasting contributions to American technological capability through persistent application of basic mechanical principles that emphasized understanding over credentials and results over institutional authority. The desert wind carried the distant sound of celebration across the Mojave landscape, where twisted metal fragments had once represented impossible problems that now served as reminders of how systematic thinking and individual courage could overcome institutional resistance to innovation. When democratic societies chose to support rather than suppress exceptional talent that emerged from unexpected sources and challenged established assumptions about expertise, authority, and the relationship between knowledge and power in rapidly changing technological environments. Rose Campbell's journey from curious 11-year-old to nationally recognized aerospace innovator had proven that brilliance didn't require degrees or credentials, just the courage to see what others missed, and the persistence to share insights that could benefit everyone. When democratic institutions embraced rather than resisted the revolutionary idea that understanding mattered more than authority, that results mattered more than reputation, and that innovation could emerge from anywhere when society valued curiosity over conformity and competence over convenience. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.